All right, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. My name is John, and I would like to welcome each of you to another Marketing Experiments Web Clinic. And actually, this is a MECLABS Web Clinic, it looks like. We've got the MECLABS logo there. And today, we're going to be doing something special. We're going to be doing a little bit of live optimization. We're actually going to apply many years of our research to your pages, to your emails, to anything that you've submitted to us. And we'll be having a good fun doing so, and hopefully at the end of the day, not only will you guys have some adjustments that you can take home, but you'll have some principles that go with that. With me, I've got a number of great friends out on the research floor. I've got Ben on this side. We've got Lauren and Laura. So Laura, I think this is is this your first time in a clinic?
It is. It's my first one.
Okay, so, but you know, she's maybe new to the clinic, but she's a veteran on the floor. All these guys are veterans. A couple of these guys, Ben and Lauren, have actually spoken and have done teaching at some of our conferences. So they're also veterans on the floor, done a lot of research. I'm really excited to bring them in, to bring some feedback. Really quick before we get started, I just want to let you know that in addition to some of the comments, we'll actually be asking you for your feedback and for your comments. We actually, if you have the GoToWebinar up, there's a Q&A functionality. I'm actually looking at it right now. We all can see it. So if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to bring them up, and we'll address them as best we can. We're also watching Twitter. So use your Twitter, it's a #WebClinic. We're going to go ahead and do that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. But before we start looking at pages, before we start actually making suggestions, I thought we would get a sense of where you guys are at. So let me ask you a couple of questions about some experiments here. You may have seen these on a previous webinar that we've had recently, but if you haven't, this is a great opportunity. Let me just get a sense from you guys. Which version do you think produced the most clicks? Version A or version B? Now these are both emails, so I'd like to see real quick, which version do you guys think? I'm watching the Q&A. I'm looking for your feedback. Which version do you think? I've got an A, okay? I've got a B, so already there's a difference. Okay, a lot of A's. A lot of A's. Excellent, all right. Keep coming. I'll just give you another quick second or two. Okay? So I can actually see your answers, like Liz just said B. And Spencer just said B. Okay? And we've got Stephen, actually not Stephen, but Dan, who said A. So I can see your answers coming through. Would you guys like to see the result? Well, it looks like it was version B that got more clicks. Now, is anybody surprised by that? I don't know about you, but you know, I thought that they taught us that you're supposed to have headers and things in your emails, right? So let's keep going. Again, I just want to see where you're at. Now, here are two versions of a page. This is an actual landing page for a campaign. You've got version A, and then you've got version B. Which one do you think had the most clicks, had the most engagement deeper into the process? Is it version A or version B? Let me see it. Okay, now I'm watching it. Again, I'm seeing, okay, I'm seeing some A's, I'm seeing some B's, right? Now, very good. Now, let me ask you guys a question. I'm not just going to let you vote this time. I want you to tell me why. Somebody tell me why they chose version A. Somebody tell me why. Why did you choose version A? I'm watching. Okay, somebody says good call to action, says Adam. Okay, better eye path on A, says Stephen. All right. Somebody tell me why you chose B. Why did you choose B? Okay, tell me why you choose B. I'm looking for somebody that's going to defend B. Cleaner look, says Rick. Okay, that's valid, very loud. Cleaner, updated UI, says, yeah, so yeah, it does, I don't know what you guys think, but it does look like it's a little bit more modern, doesn't it?
Definitely. Absolutely.
So would you guys like to see the results? So it looks like version A's get it by about 75%. Which doesn't necessarily mean that modern is bad, but it does leave me scratching my head, right? And let me just do one final example real quick. Here are two versions of a mobile email newsletter. I actually ran this test with one of my colleagues, Joey. This is a newsletter. So let me ask you I'm not going to ask you to type it in. We've been doing all of that. But just think to yourself, which one would you approve if two members of your marketing team brought these to you and you couldn't do anything? Which one would you approve and why? Think about that. Now let me actually show you the results. Which one actually got more clicks? It's a newsletter. We want them to click in. It was the non-responsive, ugly version that's really hard to read that actually got more clicks, which leads me to a really interesting question: why? And it's not just email, but it's also pages. I mean, did anybody here notice that I'm actually showing versions of pages and emails that are, well, that are kind of modern, or they're basically preached rules, right? And they kind of look like something that we should all follow. And yet at the same time, they're not necessarily working. Now, going back to the mobile version, I've seen responsive win too. Mm-hmm. So what's the difference? I've seen clean pages win, right? And I've certainly seen, emails with headers do okay. Mm-hmm. So what was the difference in each of these cases? Why is it that they're working in some cases and why is it they're not? Well, that's kind of what we do here. If you aren't familiar with us, with MECLABS, we're kind of a parent company of Marketing Sherpa and also Marketing Experiments. And we were founded on this idea of trying to understand why people say yes. You can read all of the details on the slide about different kind of experiments and the time that we've been doing the research. But ultimately, if I could sum up a lot of what we've learned over the many years, over the many emails and the many pages, it would be two things. First, people judge websites and emails very much like they judge people, right? That's one common denominator that I see, and it's been really common in the research that I've done myself, actually, on the floor. I don't know if you guys have been seeing the same thing, but because of that, one thing I've noticed is that when it comes to making a change, especially in a process or a page, it's not necessarily about the change on that page or the change in the email, but more so in the change in the mind of the person that's experiencing that piece of marketing, right?
Absolutely.
And so what that has done is that's forced us to look at all of the different experiments and all the things that we've done with a new lens to say, what are the key factors that really change what's going on in the mind? I mean, for lack of better vocabulary. And what we've come up with is this. This is just one of many heuristics. It's not a math formula that you can solve with numbers, but it's more like a guide, and you can read it like a sentence. It's pretty much saying that of all the tests that we have seen, especially when it comes to pages and things like that, the probability of conversion is the effect of really 5 elements. And this is just one of many heuristics that we have. And those elements, the motivation of the user, the clarity of its value proposition of your message, the incentive to take action, minus the friction elements present and the anxiety elements present. And really, this is kind of a way for us to quickly see the things that really make a difference in the minds of the customer. Now, you can get really nuanced, right? And I want to show you an example in a second. Well, if you were to break it down, it's really about perceived value and cost. Now, why in the world am I taking the time to show you this before we get into your pages? The reason why is because I want you to know that we're not just going to look at it and tell you what we think is cool and not cool. We just saw from 3 examples that might not necessarily work for you. What I do want to do, however, is I want us to use the methodology as a way to help you see what we've been seeing in the tests that we've run. And what's awesome about this panel that we have is that each of these guys, they've run probably at least 100 tests each. I'm just guessing. Probably at least 50 to 100 statistically significant tests. And they've used this methodology to try and understand what works. So they're going to borrow from this. Now, we've got a whole course on this you can take, but let me just show you, for example, from last clinic of how this formula ties into what we're teaching. How many people here were in the October clinic? Anybody here? Just give me a shout out on the Q&A. Was there anybody here with the Marketing Experiments Web Clinic? Anybody? Yes. Okay, Stephen, thank you. We love Stephen. He keeps coming back. Thank you, Rhonda. So if you were here in the last clinic, we talked about principles of email capture, right? And for example, we talked about the idea that any action we want our visitor to take comes with a perceived cost. Well, in the formula, that could take the form of either friction or anxiety, right? Either concern or aggravation, right? Annoyance. And for example, here in this, we showed a form where we had name, email, and phone, and the only thing that we did on the second one was we made the phone optional. We were trying to eliminate some of the concern associated with giving your phone. The result was 275% more, right? Another principle we taught was about process level value proposition. This is all a review. And we simply said that your email capture can be maximized if you do a good job communicating this on a process level. For example, here we had a submit form that really it's incentive-based. Let me give you 500 free leads, but notice the text that says, and one of our business consultants will be in touch with you, which basically means you're going to get spammed. What we said is we decided to test that hypothesis, and we said, you know, we still want our people to be able to get in touch with them, right? Mm-hmm. But what if we change the context of that? What if we help them see it differently? So we helped them to see it a different way. We said, listen, we're going to give you free access to this database, to this system that we have, and we'll get in touch with you, but just to help you out, to service you, you know, because you're already working, you're already going in there, you're already getting access yourself. A completely different take on pretty much the same types of interaction. And what was the result? In this case, it was 201%. And then finally, we talked about how you can leverage these different sensitive areas of sensitivity to achieve an objective. So if you wanted more email addresses, right, you could actually move some of your form fields to a second step and get more people to complete the first one while also working on the second step. So it's actually kind of using this areas of sensitivity like friction and anxiety to control the amount and nature of your list. So really that heuristic is a really great, quick, easy way to kind of see the parts of the mind that really are kind of sensitive in these processes. So now what I want to do is I want to actually look at the pages. Listen guys, I actually haven't looked at these pages. This is true live out for me. Now, to make sure you guys get the most value, we've asked our team to just take a couple minutes to assess the pages. So I'm going to be spending some time with each of these members, but we're also going to be giving our live feedback. And the thing that enables us to do it is really, in my opinion, it's knowledge of these heuristics. They get us in the mind of the customer really quick, and they allow us to see. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first page. This is actually from Dell, it looks like. And now I'm going to squint a little bit so we can see. I mean, there's a lot on the page already, right? It looks like a fast and scalable backup, replication, and recovery. It looks like a product. Looks like a piece of software, right? Its primary audience is to B2B. Here's what I'm going to do. Guys, I'm going to ask Ben first to tell us what are the top 3 things that you see with this page. But before you do that, tell me one thing that you think that they're doing well. And then tell me the top 3 things that you think may be good areas to test or to adjust for.
Definitely. And actually, I'd like to start with the things they're doing well, and actually have 2.
Oh, very good. We'll take
so
2.
From past testing, for software products, imagery typically works very well. People want to kind of feel the product before they purchase it.
Right.
And so having a little product tour as the first thing that a customer sees is something that I think adds a lot of value. Surprisingly, we typically tell people that too much copy and too much text is too much friction. So if we go back to our formula, right, it takes time to read, and most people don't like to read on the internet nowadays. And so you can see they have a lot of copy there. However, from past tests, we've seen that actually work with software products as well. You do need the details there, so that might actually be working for them.
So be careful. So don't just take it away, right?
Absolutely.
What you're saying is don't just take it away.
No.
You know, be very careful about those changes. Not that they're the absolute best, but just don't just yank it, right?
Exactly.
So let's go to the things that maybe are a little bit easier to take away or to change or adjust.
Absolutely. So I think as far as friction, it looks like our goal of this page, the objective of the page, is to get the customer to buy it. But if not, since it's a pretty big commitment, is to get them to contact you and maybe start a conversation with them.
Right.
Typically with these softwares, especially if it's a B2B software, there is a lot of interaction that needs to happen. It's not easy to implement a new software. And so you can see we have a whole lot of form fields on the right-hand side, and they're all screaming the same thing to me. And I just don't, it creates a lot of friction in the mind of the customer. For those of you that don't see it, on the right-hand side it says contact a Dell expert. And it says
okay.
software product
Those call to
support.
actions, yes.
And then it says, go ahead, ask us anything. To me, they're really all three of the same call to actions. And so now I'm
Right.
getting confused as to, okay, should I contact an expert? Should I call software product support? I'm not sure what to do here. So make sure that the objective of the page is highlighted on the page and that you guide the customer's thought sequence and make it very clear to them as to what you want them to do next.
Right, so there may be some confusion with all these calls to action. Honestly, just very similar. They're very similar to each other, so much that
Absolutely.
you can't distinguish.
Absolutely. And when I had a chance to look at it, I mean, there's a fourth one that pops up. I mean, we all like those chat buttons that come up.
Right.
That might be the solution, but overall, I would just say clarify the objective and guide the customer rather than kind of hit them with 3, 4 different call to actions.
Right, okay, excellent. Lauren and Laura, what just jumps out to you real quick about this page? What could you add to that?
I would say also not just competing CTAs, but also I don't really see a CTA on this page initially.
Right.
So while those may be, at the bottom there, the little green button, I can't even read what it says from here, but I think that there needs to be a stronger kind of next step for the customer.
Right. So yeah, and that's a really good point because I can kind of see that it says select, but why would I need to select? Why would you present these other calls to action if you want me to select this button? Like, what's the clear path at this point? That is a really good question that the customer is going to have, and that kind of hesitation that happens as a result, you could lose some response there. Very good, Laura. Anything? Did you see anything off the top, or do these guys cover it pretty well?
They've definitely covered it well. I definitely saw just difficulty friction in general. I think with the nature of the image that they used here,
Right.
a lot of copy on this page, especially with the heavy paragraphs underneath. Coupled with that image, it definitely there is some difficulty friction. I think cleaning it up a little might do wonders.
Right. So one of the things, just as a summary, one of the things that we're seeing that may be a potential issue that you could correct right away is some of the amount of friction that the customer's experiencing based off of the inputs that you've got there. You've got calls to action that really we can't distinguish. And then we've got 2 of them that we're not really sure, like, do you want me to select or do you want me to do this? Now, the copy and the images, there may be an opportunity there. You definitely want to be careful. There may be potential to increase the clarity of value there, but you definitely want to be very systematic and careful about how you do that. And also, one thing that I don't even know what the name of the product is. Is it fast and scalable backup?
That's a great point.
So there's definitely some lack of clarity there too.
V-Ranger.
Yeah, is that the V-Ranger? Okay, so that's, I don't know if you guys can see, but the V-Ranger, now maybe they selected that and they know that, but sometimes customers might get lost. Am I on the right page? Am I in the right place? That might need to be more prominent. So there's definitely some issues there, but you may have some good things going for you. One final note before we move to the next one is, think about it this way. You've got a very expensive product. It looks like it's about $900, right? Maybe you invite them to take that product tour before you invite them to contact. Maybe it's an interactive digital product tour that doesn't require you to talk to somebody, where you can explore, and then based off of their inputs, you could track how deep they go. You might pull up the chat at that point, or maybe you can say, can we answer any questions, or maybe you call them up afterwards and say, hey, was the product tour clear? Did we get it right? How could we improve it? That kind of thing.
Yeah, one practice that we see work very well for this industry are free trials. And I don't know if they offer one, but it would take away from having all those call to actions because you're inviting them to do something free. And so you could guide everyone down the path of, why don't you try this product for, whether that be 3 days, 7 days. And then you can still have them talk to software support or experts during that process, but they get to feel and experience the product without really having to make a commitment. So we've definitely seen that work very, very often.
So it makes sense. Audience, has this been helpful? Let me hear from you guys. Audience, I'm watching the Q&A. Has this been helpful? Yes. Okay. Excellent. Very good. Let's go on to another one. Okay. Now, audience, I'm going to start. I'm going to look to you. Okay. You kind of see where we're going with the formula. Let's take a look at this next one. All right. I'm going to ask Lauren in just a second to tell me the same kind of things. Okay. It looks like we've got a sign-up page for an account. of all things. I'm not sure why I would want to create an account on Bissell. Is that the vacuum company, right? So I'm just saying, I need a little help here. So hopefully Lauren's taking a closer look at that. All right, but audience, real quick, just tell me one thing that really stands out to you. What's one thing that maybe seems disjointed or about the customer experience or something that would be affecting or negatively affecting the response? Very good. Too many elements to fill in. Split up the form fields too many, says Drew. High cost, says Stephen. We were talking about mental cost probably, and I don't know. I don't see maybe there's a Social Security form field in there somewhere. I get too many fields. So we're getting a lot of too many fields. Images are distracting from what I'm trying to do, says Jonathan. All right, so sorry if I stole your thunder there, Lauren, but what do you, two things. Things that they should be careful about messing with, things that potentially may be doing good, and then definitely things that they should look into testing or possibly adjusting.
So things to be careful about messing with, I would say it depends on what account information they actually need.
Right.
So before you just start taking fields off, obviously, determining from a business perspective what you actually need, to be valuable. Unfortunately, John, I cannot answer your question.
All right, so why do I need to create an account for my vacuum?
Yep, that was, to be honest, was probably the biggest question I had when coming here. And after reading some of the copy, I sort of understood why you were asking me for this.
Right.
So why the company wanted this, but I still didn't really understand really what the value was to me.
Right.
So someone made a comment of the images on the right are distracting. And I think Laura made a comment earlier too that they look like ads, but actually that's where you get the real value of what an account is.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. So it's save
the
money.
images themselves. So the copy is what's really helping, but it's the images themselves that the fact that they look like stock. I don't know what you guys think, but go ahead. Sorry, but I'm following. Yeah.
Yeah. So you save money, or you can keep track of purchases and order replacement parts, and then expedited customer service. And so I think from a company standpoint, it made sense, but from a customer standpoint, I still wasn't really sure why I should kind of, as people said, so many form fields fill this out. The cost and the value just didn't kind of balance out for me. So I would really encourage you guys to kind of take a step back and figure out what value this is bringing. So like John mentioned before, it's not really page changes that are going to fix this. It's more changes in the mind of the customer of what this is actually going to get me by signing up for it.
So they could actually affect that then, like with the headline. Instead of saying create an account, you could say maybe summarize those three things. Maybe get get immediate availability to parts. Get special deals on upgrades or whatever could go wrong with a vacuum. We're here, I guess, or whatever product that that they're.
Because I think they say get parts and stuff, but my vacuum doesn't break very often.
Or I hope it wouldn't break.
Often enough that I need to register my parts to make sure that I can get the right ones next time. So maybe if it's there looks to be some sort of cleaner or something something that can maintenance stuff.
Something that I would buy more often.
And maybe tell me why I want that. It just says get these things, but I still don't really know why I want these things. So
that's really good. Get this when you create an account. So and be very clear. So Lawrence pointed out something that's really good. First, I love the thing about the form fields because you do have to have a conversation with your sales team. You really do. Don't just take them off. There was one company that I did research with that we finished, and I think the whole management changed. And then somebody decided to take all the form fields off, and all of their sales department flew up in a frenzy. It was really bad, and I heard this from some friends that I had there, and then they had to change it back and everything. So it's a really dangerous thing. But I really like what you're saying about moving that primary value. I can remember of an experiment I ran with a group where you had to register in order to purchase. But there are people that were registering that weren't ready to purchase yet. They were just registering for the sake of it. And which, again,
don't we all wish that was the case?
It made sense in the industry for those people. And when we moved the value from the side up to the top and said, get this when you do an account, and then bulleted it out, then all of a sudden we started to see a difference. We didn't even change any of the form fields. We actually kept, it was long and arduous like this, but that's all we did. And we did fairly well in that case. So that's really good feedback. Ben and Laura, what do you guys think? Well, Ben, real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I would just start by saying we've seen long forms like this, over and over. From a company's perspective, you always want to get as much information as you can about the customer, understandably, and a lot of times for good reasons. You want to make sure that your marketing is relevant to them,
Of course.
and you want to make sure you can reach them. However, here, if you look at the fulcrum of the cost versus the value, I think we've pretty much summarized it, that the cost side is much heavier here, and so.
Right.
There are ways to play around with this. They're very much two dials. I'm assuming that this form probably doesn't get a lot of leads. The leads that it does get are probably of very high value. And so one thing that you could play around and test here is to potentially remove a lot of these form fields and make a lot of them optional, which they may even be, but put them on the next step.
The second page.
Exactly. Put some value there, a couple form fields, their name, their email address, maybe even only.
Yeah.
And then on the second step, hey, and explain to them why you're asking for more information. Hey, we'd like to make sure we send you relevant coupons, and then ask them questions that will help you do so. Yeah,
it brings me back to, we've done some testing on brand-based sites where the actual products are sold in the retail, but the brand actually has a site where they're trying to have that direct relationship with the customer. And we've seen that people are actually willing to go onto those brand sites and submit their information, but you just have to give them reason enough.
Exactly.
Even if it's like coupons or things like that, there has to be reason enough, and we have tested it. And we have seen success there. I wish I could tell the test specifically, but I can't. But what you're saying is right. You know what I mean? One thing I really love about what you said is the reason why we're collecting the information is because we want to make our communication more relevant.
Exactly.
Customers are hungry for
Hopefully
this stuff.
that's the case.
Right. So why not tell them? Why not? It's like, why not tell them?
Right.
If there's ketchup and mustard and cheese on the burger, why not actually show that in the ad? Instead of, you see what I'm saying? Why not actually tell them?
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. It's like, even if you have to have that piece of information, have it. Here's why we want it. And in terms of what they get.
Absolutely.
Right? And we've run a test like that, and it was successful. So that's a really good point. Laura, anything else? We keep stealing the thunder from you, but I promise you're next.
So I've noticed that the questions on the bottom have a very different feel to the ones at the top. They're sort of a softer ask. They're asking about, what pets do you have in the home? And these questions are sort of reminding the visitor of potentially why they'd want to register for Bissell, right? So it'd be really interesting to maybe start with those questions, the softer questions first, and maybe make it a two-step or get them invested, and then go on to the harder questions. So
right. So
it could be an interesting experiment.
So here's how we get special deals or get special recommendation products or new products or something related, whatever, right? And then you actually have the questions about, okay, what kind of pet do you have? What kind of this? And then they're like, oh, okay, well that makes sense. And if they just want my email address, then they're really trying hard to serve me. And then the next space, and if you give us this extra information, maybe you'll get an extra vacuum for free. No, not really, but why not? So that's
everyone needs two vacuums.
Right, yeah, everyone needs two vacuums. I apparently do, My dog hair there's so much.
Someone said, clearly MECLABS people don't use modern vacuums. I think that was maybe to my comment about vacuums breaking. So maybe you do need two vacuums.
Maybe I do need two vacuums, right. So, all right, well, excellent. Let's, a lot of great information here, but really the biggest thing here is help them to remember, even if you've already told them, help them to remember why. Why are they even here at this page? They had to click here for some reason, right? There's probably something that you used or some kind of point of value. So make sure you remind them of that very clearly in their iPath where they could see it so they don't have to search for it. And use form fields in your ask strategically to help imply that there's value. Very excellent point from Laura. So let's move on to the next one. Here we've got pervasant, I think. Hopefully I spelled it or I said it right. Okay. Have great paperless meetings. So I think we actually asked Laura to take a closer look at this. So Laura, I'm going to ask you really quick the same question. Things that we should be careful about messing with, things that may be potentially good, and then things that they should definitely consider testing. or changing or adjusting based on what you've seen in the field?
Yeah, so this page is showcasing a product which, for their ideal prospect, they may clearly understand what it is.
Right.
I,
okay.
on the other hand, when I look at this, I was challenged to sort of understand exactly what the product was.
Right.
So for being careful of what we want to mess with, I think we need to first really understand who their ideal prospect is and how much they inherently know about the product, because
Right.
my first thought was a board portal. Well, I have no idea what a board portal is.
A board
but
portal.
Perhaps in that industry, that's, you know,
Well, Star Wars is
well-
coming up, you know, I mean, right? Maybe it's,
Yeah, so I think that kind of goes to the messing with. First, we need to understand their ideal prospect and what is commonly known in their industry. Some things they're doing well. I mean, it's certainly not an ugly page. There's a lot of things they're doing right here. The key thing that really kind of jumped out to me is it takes a long time to understand what they're trying to capture here.
Right.
So this page, as you're looking at it now, is obviously been broken up into 2 parts, but
Right.
it's a very long page. This form field is really buried underneath there. There's certainly a lot of value that needs to be conveyed before we can get this information we're looking for, but just in the way they're asking for the information, it really isn't quite clear what the call to action is. So
Right.
always kind of thinking about on your page, what am I trying to accomplish? What's the objective? And is that clear for the visitor? Is definitely
Right.
a big opportunity here, I think.
That's really good. Yeah, one of the things that I think Laura was really speaking to very well was the 4M. You guys remember at the very beginning of the equation, the 4M? That talks about the motivation of the user. The one thing that we don't have when we're sitting here that we're trying to be respectful of is your knowledge of your customer, right? And, you know, to be fair, we have seen pages where the customer has had such a great knowledge of the company prior or of the terminology prior to coming in that they could get away with language. And in fact, in some cases, if they didn't use the right language, they would lose credibility. But is that the case here? I mean, if this is a product for people that are in meetings all the time, I am one of those people. And if it's going to help me get away, you know, get through my meeting faster, but yeah, I can't understand, right? So there isn't, you know, that's something that you need to ask. But that's a very good point. Like the motivation of the user definitely has, you know, a part to play in this. From a page perspective, I noticed that, you know, there's a lot of content, but even, so you've got the 4 boxes at the top. Are those supposed to be 4 things I should click on? You know, that's not necessarily or easily clear to me. You've got the evenly weighted columns down below. Now, maybe those are just sections, but is there a specific order I could read those in? Can I just read those out of order? Do you want to let me read those out of order? Am I going to mix everything up? Like, you know, you really want to guard against unsupervised thinking here. Because that's really, the template itself has some potential issues, but for the most part, like what Laura said, there's a lot of good here in the template. Definitely clarity of value. I mean, you know.
And to that point, a great thing they are doing, which could be moved up, which speaks to clarity of value, is those 4 sections. Those are actually some really great reviews, I think, if I remember correctly.
Oh, those are reviews.
Which do 2 things, right? They're going to speak to not only the credibility of the product and
Right.
really showcase the value that way, but they also kind of speak to clarity of what it is, because they title the type of person that's commenting and how it's impacted their lives. So it allows people to understand more about what the product is and what it does and add that credibility. So I would recommend in this case trying to move that up to really draw attention to that.
Right. Maybe there's another way to do it, but the value of the substance there is critical, and it's probably would you argue it's the one thing that's clearest on this page?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so maybe you've got that working for you. You want to use it. Lauren, what do you think? Anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, for me, the product doesn't feel real. Like it feels very kind of like a WordPress site that is, you know, it just kind of feels like a lot of other sites. And so I don't see real people. I don't see what the product looks like. It's very much like pretty design and pretty colors, but it does not give me a feel for the product at all. And I can't visualize what this is going to do for me.
Right, and that's really important, guys, because there's one of the things that we've noticed is that there's a subliminal level of interaction that's going on, and people, when they look at a situation, there's certain things that they look for. It's kind of like when you walk into a room, you're looking for the doors out. Yeah. You know, I mean, that's probably the easiest way. You're automatically assessing for danger. I mean, we're kind of built that way. Right? Yeah, I'm just getting a little, wait a minute, right? So, right, yeah, it's very much like, and that's what fuels it, is that first and foremost, that we're kind of built that way. Well, the same thing kind of happens in pages, is that if they can't figure out where they're at and what they can do, and very quickly, it starts to have it starts to take a toll on them. And in this case, even the way in which the site is designed, the page is designed, can have an impact. Like if it's an app, what if this was more like a page that call me crazy, but what if it was like, what if it was a page that, you go to a page where you actually download an app in an app store, where it has like the description, the screenshots and everything. If it's an app that's supposed to be like that,
Gotcha, yeah.
what if the page kind of took a form like that? When all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, this is an app that I download, and now I can process it in the way that I know how. Sorry guys, I lost my microphone there. So what if this is an app that I could download, right? What if this is an app that I could download, and that page actually helped me to see that it's an app that I can download? We look at page types sometimes like that. I mean, we recently did something in-house where we had a page that was selling a book. It was so funny. And it looked like every kind of page but the page that you would encounter that's selling you a book, right? You go to Amazon, you get a certain type of page, right? You go to Barnes & Noble, you get a certain type of page. But when you come to this page, you don't get that page. So people are like, oh, there's nothing to buy here. However, if you go, we change the page to match that, and all of a sudden we're noticing that sales are going way up because people actually know there's something to buy here, right? And the page looks like it. So that's kind of a wild idea. But if this is the case here, where it's a downloadable app, you might want to consider that somewhere, maybe if not immediate in your strategy. Ben, I've been talking. I'm tired of hearing myself. Any last thoughts on this?
I'm not sure I have too much more to add, because I think we had some great ideas. I would say, again, the idea of, and we just talked about it, of actually displaying the product is always great for software, because again, people want to feel the product is real and they want to experience it before they go any further. The only other thing that I would mention overall that I see, and we're all guilty of it, and it's probably the number one factor that when I look at sites that there's always room for improvement, and that's value proposition, and to really understand what is the value of my product.
Yes.
Because even things like have great paperless meetings, on the surface sounds very valuable, but what is the true value behind it to me? Okay. And so there are things like saving times, making sure action items get followed up on. I mean, what are all the value points that are actually, at the end of the day, going to make this a great product for me? Right. And so if we can truly understand what those are and then bring them out to the surface on the page, then I think we have a home run.
I would take that further too and say, because I think the whole like saving time and action items, like that's super important, but it's taking a step further, because one of the tests we actually ran on an apps for business site, we tested the features versus the benefits, or like the actual like, this is what comes with the product versus the benefits of the product. And people like to see the features actually with the benefits tied to it, because I think like saying like save time, that's said by everybody, but to say like, action items, you can follow up on action items because we have this feature that allows you to send individual action items to each person in the meeting. And
clarity trumps persuasion.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So explain what feature of your app creates the benefit.
Right. So there's a bit of credibility and clarity that goes into that, and that's really good. So there's a lot of opportunity here. But definitely, I could have great paperless meetings with an iPad and without your app. So be a little bit more specific, okay, right, as to what the team is saying, and utilize the things that you do have working for you that add clarity. But clarity is really the biggest enemy here, I think. There's a lack of it. So take the time to get clarity and look at every single element. All right, let's go ahead and look at another one. And this time I'm going to ask the audience, again, to go first, and then we'll ask Ben. This is OneGuard. This is B2C. This is a home warranty. So if you ever bought a home and you get like when I bought a home, they would do anything in my house for like a year for free. Of course, nothing's going to break down in a year. They're always going to break down at like 2 or 3 years. And so this is the kind of industry that's going to capitalize on that market and that that fear that naturally exists. And yeah, it is pretty bad, builders everywhere. So the question is, audience, let's look at this page, okay? There obviously, it looks like a home page. what do you see that is potentially having a negative effect on the experience that's basically going to prevent the customer from wanting to click in? What would you change? What would you adjust? What stands out to you? Okay, we've got a lot. Somebody says there's a lot of calls to action. Okay, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Like I see like 4 things that I can click on right away. What else? I'm watching for your feedback. Boys, this is a stumper. No, either that or yeah, there we go. Seems like more of an insurance product and not a warranty. Okay, all right. So what else? I know you guys are busy reading the page. Okay. Yeah, Adam says, well, where's the testimonials? We got to add the testimonials, right? There's got to be something there, some kind of immediate thing, right? Anybody else? Get quote in a slider? Yes, so that's interesting, right? So we've got, what are the 3 calls to action there? We've got compare plans, purchase plan, and then request a quote. What's the
request service?
Request service. What's the difference?
The quote's up at the top.
Interesting. And then we've got get quote and a button. Oh, interesting. Yeah, there we go. That's slider 2. Very good. Okay, thanks, Dave. So Ben, real quick. Let's just go straight. Let's just be negative. What's the top 3 negative things, and we'll be nice.
So I'm going to quote you from I think about 2 minutes ago, and that is, when you get to a page, the first questions you should answer is, where am I? What can I do here? And why should I do it with you?
Right.
And for people that are not familiar with this industry, again, we got to be very cautious of the motivation here, because the traffic that gets here may be very well aware of what home warranty is, but if you're not, it's not clearly explained.
Right.
And looking through the page, there's actually a tremendous amount of really good value, but it's hidden and it's not brought to the top. I think all we have to do here is to really take all that value and put it in a better thought sequence for the customer, so that when they scroll through the page and absorb this page, that we guide that thought sequence much more clearly. The other thing is the call to actions. I think the audience mentioned it, and there are a lot of call to actions.
Yes.
Nobody wants to get a quote. A quote always to me screams, I'm going to give you some information and you're going to call me for the rest of my life until I give you my money.
Right.
And so add some value in there. You are talking about how you're saving people time and money. So how about a call to action that says, see how much money we can save you today? And so now you're getting away from the quote to what's the end benefit for the customer.
Right. Yeah, as homeowners, it seems like for everything I want to fix, I got to get a quote. And I got to get 3 quotes, because the quote from the one guy is probably higher than the other guy, and then quote.
And here's the thing, from a customer's perspective, should I really have to give you information for you to tell me how much your product is? I mean, what other services or products are you going, like if you go to a store, you don't have to, and you want to buy something, you don't have to give them your credit card or your information before they tell you how expensive it is. And so why do we do it on websites? We do it all the time because we try to get leads. However, that value exchange is oftentimes not there.
And even if I have to have certain points of information, because you're right, to some extent I'm like, wait a minute, it's just a warranty, right? I mean, is it like, come on, but at the same time, you're just gonna see how big my house is and then just decide how much you want to charge me? We're like, sure, but no, if you genuinely need to know certain things about my house to see how much it could cover, then tell me, so that I know that's what, tell me how getting your price works.
Absolutely.
And it's maybe don't use quote, maybe use, get a firm price, or get the exact price, or you see how much you can save, or any of those things. But definitely don't stick with the standard. It sounds like we're going to recommend that they test a different language there. And is there anything else that really jumps out to you, Ben, that just really?
Well, I think aside from the friction and the value proposition, it's decide on what you want the objective of the page to be, and it's part of the friction. But again, we've seen the page earlier that does the same thing, and it's like we have a lot of call to actions. We're asking the prospect to do a lot of things here, and so guiding that thought sequence and bringing them down to the one action that we want them to take, I think, is important.
Right.
I may say something that kind of contradicts some of the stuff that
Please
you guys
do.
said.
I'm looking. Audience, you think the web cleans get a little boring? I think we need a little controversy.
Let's do it.
So,
Healthy conflict.
Yeah. So, because I do agree that it looks like too many CTAs, but I think also one of the tests that we have run in the past is it's not necessarily, there's competing CTAs and then there's like just too many CTAs.
Right.
And so the ones in the middle, I'm not sure that I would call those competing CTAs. I think, so what I mean by that is there is a specific person who knows what they're coming to do and they themselves know which bucket they fit into.
Right.
So I think competing CTAs are things like get a quote, see a free tour, and read this information, which I could be looking for information and fall into all three of those buckets. Whereas here, compare plans is very much I'm still looking.
yes.
Purchase plan is I'm ready to purchase, and request service is I am a current customer.
Right.
And so I don't necessarily think that it's too many calls to action. Maybe it may just look like a lot, and we need to reorganize the page in order to not make it feel so overwhelming. But I would say that may be one of the things that you wouldn't just take away without testing it.
Either that, or maybe it's the language. I mean,
Yeah.
and Lauren makes a really good point because it doesn't occur, the problem doesn't occur on the page; it occurs in the mind. And
Right.
so, in some cases, and you're very right. I've also run tests where I've I've had multiple calls to action competing, but they actually weren't competing.
Exactly.
Because they were written very specifically for a specific type of customer,
Exactly.
right? And if that the problems occur is when they become very muddy, where I can't tell the difference. That's where the hesitation, that's where the friction comes into play. So the question is that maybe it's not that you have too many, but maybe they're not clear enough
Yeah.
to really match up with the customer types you're trying to. Because I can understand with the homepage, be like, okay, yeah, I've got customers coming, I've
Yep.
got new prospects. And of my new prospects, I've got two types of prospects, ones who are ready to buy and ones who are just looking. Like, how do I service all of them? Well, there's a way, but maybe there's a better way to say it here.
Well, and this is where data plays a critical role,
Yes.
right? Because to get away from that equally weighted, problem that we're seeing here, looking at the data to tell us what are the majority of people doing on this page could be a really good solve for this. So like you said, the last one is request service. That's an existing customer function. A lot of us are trained to go to that top right corner and maybe sign in as an
Yes.
existing customer,
Yes.
maybe relocating that. If your main priority here is getting that purchase, why not make that the primary, make it larger, kind of make it stand out.
Right.
So definitely data would be crucial here.
That's good.
That's a very good point. And again, that goes back to the subliminal aspect of it that I mentioned, is that customers have certain expectations that they bring to the table when they show up. They look for certain things. And honestly, they've been trained to look for that top right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll never forget the test from Adam Lapp where he wanted to, he actually put a link on the way to the Xbox up to the top to intercept people before they would leave, and he actually got people,
Nice.
right? Because he knew that's where they were going. Like, I'm losing, link, right? So, I mean, it's the same. So there's a bit of that that's going on, but all of these points are very valid. So what you have to do as a marketer is you have to take a look at these things and ask yourself, what do I do? What of all these things should I do? Well, I think you definitely have some things to work with here. I mean, with those three may be the right ones, but maybe they certainly are at least tripping a couple of us up.
Absolutely.
So maybe, but Lauren said, hey, it looks like you're doing the right thing, so perhaps you could test the language.
Yeah.
Definitely test the language of that. Perhaps you can move one of those up to the top right and just make it clear. Get a quote. There's probably some better language there, but a lot of clarity of value here. A lot of lack of clarity, period, is really kind of the main culprit here. And then finally, there's probably some content at the bottom that you could probably move up top before you start asking them to do something that could actually have a greater impact on that. Even, we've seen tests, it's really odd, where we just change the headline and a couple bullets and it affects conversion 4 pages down, 5 pages down. It's just amazing. But that's what Ben's talking about. So there's really a common denominator here. It's not necessarily the page template itself, but certainly the words that you're using and perhaps the amount of content you're presenting and when. Really the order in which you present things. So go back to the drawing board and say, when is it right to present what at what place, right? for each site. I think if you start there, you're going to really make a positive difference for this particular type of page. All right, let's see. We've got one more. Let's do one more. We've got just a couple minutes left. This is Nature Canada. Help us create real change for nature. Okay. So our primary audience is donors, and is this an actual donation form? Yes. So they're actually giving money on this page. They're trying to encourage donations. No, you're just trying to get donations, right? So you want to connect with the people who are really advocates for your cause. Lauren, what do you say? Let's just go straight to we've only got just a couple minutes left.
Yep. So I'll start with just kind of some value points. So this group is really it's more of like a conservation or a nature, nonprofit organization, and they're trying to collect donations so that they can, it seems like, do lobbying and maybe some governmental issues. So one thing, we actually had a nonprofit workshop here last week, and I was talking to someone, and it was super interesting to me because they were collecting donations as well, and they were saying, with your donation, we can do these things. It's very similar to what they're doing here, a bunch of bullets about what they could do with donations. And he mentioned that they have actually tested what they couldn't do if we didn't have your money.
Very interesting.
And that actually seemed to work well too. So that could be a really interesting test for you guys.
Clarity of value, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it is a nonprofit, so it's more of like, okay, we can do these things with your money, but it's almost a fear-based playing on anxiety of like the things that we can't do if you don't donate. So that would just be kind of a tidbit that I would suggest testing. But then the other thing regarding those bullets, they're kind of vague and a little bit fluffy. We may be able to talk to these people, or we can maybe push this bill. And so
if you give me money, I might be able to go buy some food. But
right, and that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but that's how I read it.
Yes.
And especially with the headline of "Help us create real change," and then your bullets are kind of like, we may be able to do these things. It just didn't connect with me. So I would be more, we will do this, and we will, be more forceful with that to instill a little bit more confidence that my money is actually going to make that real change that you're claiming.
Yes.
And then just a last point is that on anxiety, the form itself has a tiny little secure button at the top, which actually made me even more worried because it looks so not
so
real.
Unsecure, yeah. Right.
So I would definitely, find out if you have any sort of, accreditations or seals that you can put up here to increase the sense of, being on a secure form field when giving, my credit card information.
That's awesome. Real quick, Laura, what do you think? Anything, just the top thing that points out?
I would think the credibility here is key, right? When you're donating, you want to know that your money is going to that cause. So I think really highlighting that, we saw it in a page that we didn't get to today, but they really highlight on that 100% of your donation will benefit. So anything around that I think is really crucial.
Excellent. This reminds me of a test that we ran with an Alzheimer's kind of institute or research foundation. And we got to this point where we were getting very specific. So one thing I've been hearing a lot is specificity, right? Specificity converts. Yes. I think that's a first step. But when you get to that point, there's still this issue of anxiety. Like, first of all, is this even real? Is this fake? I mean, is this like just a WordPress plugin that is not, you know what I mean? Like, that's a question. But there's another fundamental anxiety underneath that. Like, what are you going to do with my money that we're trying to answer with specificity? One thing that you might try that we've been seeing that's extremely effective is the testimonial. Okay? What about, if you're changing nature, can you show an example where nature was saved or changed as a result? Can you show pictures?
Right.
Of somebody, letting bears out of cages? That's an exaggeration. Forgive me. But can you dramatize that in any way, shape, or form? Can you, or somebody that's really passionate about the cause, how they were emotionally touched by something that you did? That's what we tested in that example. Not only did it get more donations, but it got a higher average donation per person. And we started with a testimonial, and then the founder added a testimonial right there closer to where you put the credit card information, which is simply to say, listen, I can't save my wife. The disease is already taken for her, but I don't want anybody else to suffer, and I want to do whatever I can. Like, it's just connecting with the person, and that's really what you're doing with those testimonials, those stories. So that might, when you get to that level of specificity, where you're answering that question as honest as you can about what you're going to do with that donation, try those two different ways. First, be specific, trying to be clear. Remind them of all the things that brought them to that page in the first place. And then perhaps use a story, or maybe even combine the two. Sometimes, it's not unreasonable to combine things like that. It makes for a little bit longer page. You have to find out if that friction is necessary or not, right? That's the great thing about friction, is that it's not just that people are annoyed by a lot of content. They're only annoyed by the content that they feel is unnecessary to helping them make the decision, right? So that's what you have to figure out. That's what you have to figure out in these situations. So that's excellent. Do we have time for one more comment, or are we finished? 2 minutes? Ben, real quick, what do you think?
I like that you brought up motivation. To me, when I think about non-profits or helping a cause, the real value a lot of times, or at least to me, and I get the feeling from those that I've interacted with, that the real value is not in giving the organization money or giving them food or whatever it is that you're donating. It's seeing that you're making a difference in the world. And so I would actually almost add one more test idea to what Lauren was talking about, that talked about what they could do, what they couldn't do. I think what would be really valuable would be to showcase what you have done and what difference it has made in the world. And really, that's the emotional part of donating, right? If you're saving nature in this case, or changing nature, kind of play with those emotions and show them what their donations, the past donations, have actually done, how they've made a difference. It gives you credibility as well, because in a lot of ways this always reminds me of politics, because in politics we always talk about what we may be able to do or what we couldn't do if the other party wins.
Right.
Well, the real track record and what people always look at is, well, what have you done?
Yes.
And so I think you could apply that in this case and kind of have some test ideas around that.
Yeah.
Right. The common denominator here is definitely more specificity, I think. Be more specific. Take the time to actually help customers understand on a very specific level what their donation is going to do, either what it can't, without it, what's going to happen, with it, or what it has done, or even, how it's touched other people, like the, people you're trying to reach. And then finally, the other common denominator here is that, the form itself needs to be backed up with some credibility. I would even experiment testing a linear form where it's not side by side like that. Where it's like start with the information and put the gift information down below. But certainly you want to pair it up. That will give you more room to put things like seals, security seals, additional testimonials, things like that. But you see the common denominators. You've got some different test ideas within those. I'd recommend you go down those roads so that you could better connect with the people that are passionate about what you're passionate about, and so you guys can make a bigger difference. So with that, I think we're out of time. Audience, was this helpful for you? Did we at least provide some value on this? Okay, thank you, Rick, for that. I appreciate that. Excellent. Thank you so much, Adam. Really appreciate that too. So Spencer, you don't count. Spencer works for us. He's just kissing up. Actually, he's not. Spencer's awesome.
He's actually a nice guy.
He's a nice guy. Always teasing Spencer. Thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you for your trust. Thank you, Ben, Lauren, and Laura, for actually taking time and coming out here on the floor and sharing some of your insights with us. They're going to have to go back and run some more tests. But we'll look forward to see you in the next Marketing Experiments Web Clinic and also the next Live Op Clinic. So again, thank you so much, and we look forward to adding more value in the days to come.